it because casualty rates were so high for medics. And everybody else is pinned down. You go. If you can, possibly. But I lucked out having the medical degree, or biological degree. They put me in a medical lab at Camp McCoy, Wisconsin, and so I did bacteriology for a year.
Okay, so you
But there's a couple little sidebars there.
all right.
Our company, camp commander was concerned about snakes. And so he'd have the troops send the snakes into the lab, and since I had had biological training, I became the person who received all these. Well, fortunately, most of the larger ones came in dead, and we never did get a viper, poisonous snake, although they did have Massasaurus, the pygmy rattlesnake in Wisconsin. But the one thing that I got a lot of, and they'd be live in the envelope, would be what we call a glass snake. And that is simply a legless lizard, about 12 inches long. You just take them out and turn them loose, they're harmless.
kind of like a big worm, huh?
Yeah. And also during the summer there, 5th Army entomologist Captain Stapp out of Chicago came down, and they were concerned about mosquitoes as a problem. And Captain Stapp drafted me to do the mounting and identification of all the mosquitoes. Incidentally, they did have Anopheles mosquitoes in Wisconsin, which are the kind that carry malaria. But since malaria pretty well wiped out, it didn't occur there. However, I might say that I did a lot of slides on returning Korean veterans who had bad cases of malaria. You could run that microscope down, and you didn't have to search slide. You'd have the prettiest picture of malaria, plasmodia immediately. Never saw the likes of it. Must have been a real violent form of malaria that they were getting.
I had an uncle there too, Jim Lechner. He came back from Korea with malaria. And yeah, it was bad. I guess there are more than
there's several
forms of malaria.
There's several forms.
He had the type that would just render him unconscious to the point, shaking and severe.
You've heard about chills. It's unbelievable the chills that one gets with malaria, having been there. And when it ends up, you are completely a rag. You're so limp, you don't have any strength left. It's unbelievable.
I remember that with Jim. And he would go from one to the extreme to the other. He would go from a high temperature, and all of a sudden he'd just be chilling.
I was fortunate. I never had a recurrence once I came back to the United States.
He had him probably for 5 or 6 years after he came back from Korea. I know he had a bout or two of it even after he went on the police department up in the Kansas City area, and it was just reoccurring malaria.
Bad stuff.
You twice separated from unit.
Yeah, shortly after we made the beachhead, I got bogged down in the marsh. And when that happened, my platoon just kept on going. Unfortunately, I caught a Jeep and caught up with it.
But you got bogged down, huh?
Yes. I was carrying about 70 pounds weight. And somehow or other I got separated from them and bogged down, and I had to catch up with them some way. I knew they were up the road.
When
we did.
When you're not carrying a lot of medical equipment with you. You have a bag with your medical equipment.
You have two.
You have two.
Yeah.
And then as you would use that out, was resupply for that
What I did is I'd go back to the battalion aid station to get all those supplies, which was usually not too far from the front.
But they usually had the supplies
Oh
you
yeah,
needed.
the wonder drugs during World War II were the sulfa drugs. Man, did we use the sulfa drugs. They saved a lot of lives.
Yeah, I remember those from boot camp films, you know, and field.
They were great.
Field wounds.
And they still use sulfa drugs.
After how long were you in during the Korean conflict?
1 year.
There's a conflict of the war.
Yeah, well, yeah. 1 year, I happened to get leave and came home during that year. And just by chance, I went up to K-State and got admission for fall enrollment in graduate school. Why? I don't know. But I wanted to go back and get some more courses. And so, prior to the start of school in September, there was a note on the bulletin board. Any reservist who had admission to a college or university would be released early. I just walked back to my foot locker, pulled my papers out, went up front, and I'm on my way home. What a lucky circumstance.
Yeah. You and Bill McFall were just talking about being at the right place at the right time,
yes.
because of his experience on the USS Indianapolis.
Mm-hmm.
A dropped shell by one of his shipmates on him kept him off of the Indianapolis when it went down.
Actually, the fact that I was back in the hospital with malaria and leptospirosis, I missed out on one of the 2 Banzai charges that my unit went through.
So,
but incidentally, since then, I saw a documentary on military medicine. And they went from way back when we didn't know about anesthesia and all that sort of thing right up through probably Korean War. But the comment that I came to realize was very true was that the casualty rate among medics was so high. Yeah, I'm surprised I'm here.
I'm glad you are.
I am too.
I'm glad you are. I read a lot of books by Stephen Ambrose, and in his book about Citizen Soldier, which was D-Day, he talks about the medics, and they're a lot, and he brings forth a lot of what you're just saying.
The Japanese did not honor the Red Cross identification.
I've heard
So
that.
in the South Pacific, we looked like any other GI, and we also carried a weapon.
Oh, you were armed then?
Oh yes, we were armed.
We're not.
No, we were
not
not.
The
We were not
unarmed type.
Right. We did
Right.
carry a carbine usually.
Yeah, I know in Europe they very seldom did, but a lot of those guys picked up a weapon from here once in a while.
Couldn't blame them.
Yeah. I've talked to some priests that were over there, and they said, hey, when it gets really thick and you're trying to save what you've got, you're going to do anything you can to save it. And I saw this in a line one time in a movie, and he said, let me tell you what, that's really not a line from a movie. He said, I've used that myself over in Europe. He said, pray hell, son. He said, let's fight now, we'll pray later, So, and that was I thought pretty good advice.
Well, adrenaline will get you through a lot.
Yeah.
And you can't say that you never were frightened.
Right.
You were frightened a lot.
You bet. You had to be.
Sure.
You had to be. So you come back and the Korean conflict, by happenstance, you enrolled in Postgraduate school.
Graduate school, yeah.
And what'd you get your master's in?
Again in biology.
Again in biology.
Mm-hmm.
How long did you work for the state?
Well, when I retired 17 years ago now, in April, I had 35 accrued years in state